Hello, I am Abby Jones, and first off, I would like to say thank you for letting this assignment be due at midnight. That really helped me out, so thank you. And I decided for this assignment to read the Where No Evil book by Greta Egan. And I was pretty skeptical going into this assignment, reading this book. I read the first couple pages and didn't, I wasn't finding a particular interest in it. I really just didn't feel like it was an amazing book. But the further I got into it, it really started to grab my attention when she started giving style tips and dressing tips that were really practical for my life and for me. I really started to enjoy the book, and by the end of it, I actually really loved the book, and I thought that she gave a lot of really great opinions and ideas about things that, all of us can do, whether we are rich, whether we are poor, no matter who we are, what circumstance we live in. She gave a lot of really great ideas of how we can start to be more conscious about our clothing and what goes into the production and the textiles and the coloring, just all sorts of things. And so I do have to say I was pleasantly surprised by the book, and I really enjoyed it. Some more things that I liked about it. I loved how she gave product tips, like makeup and skincare. I like makeup and I like skincare, and so I thought that was really nice how she incorporated that into dress practices, because it is part of our dress practice, and so I liked how she gave ideas on those. I also liked how throughout the book there was so many resources and websites that she lists, ideas that she uses, places she goes to shop. I found that really beneficial because it's really easy to say, oh, all clothing companies are evil. You have to find ones that are sustainable. And then we have that information, but what do we do with it? I'm sorry, my washer's really loud, so excuse that. But I thought she just gave lots of resources so that it was applicable to me. I could say, I can go to that website, and actually right now in my browser I have a boot company pulled up that she talked about. I'm looking for winter boots, and I thought, you know what? Here's a great place to start being sustainable. So I really enjoyed the back on page 187. She gave a resource page, and so she just has tons and tons of websites and places that she shops for things. And I like how she also gave different places that had different costs. So there was more affordable ones to higher priced ones, and I felt like that really catered to a wide variety of people, because obviously I can't go out and buy the highest costing skincare, but she also listed ones that are in my price range and are affordable, and so I appreciated that. I also liked how she gave organizing tips. I'm a very neat person, and so any organizing tips I get, I love, and I really enjoyed how she taught me how to clean out my closet, organize my closet, but also make it sustainable, and helping me realize the things that I have in my closet at the same time. So that was something that I wasn't expecting to be in that book, but it was, and I really enjoyed that. I also liked how she gave coloring tips, like for your different skin types, what colors look best on you. I am very interested in all that, so I just thought that was fun. Moving on to things that I didn't necessarily love, I thought it was interesting in the book. She talks a lot about, she talks about donating and how we can take our clothes to local places that will take them. And I thought it was interesting. In class we had talked about how donating isn't always necessarily the most sustainable answer, or isn't always the best, because the places that end up getting these places, we watched a video, I think in Africa, a country who is trying to build their own, systems, and by us just donating them clothes, we are, oh, what's the word? It's a crutch to their society, and they're not able to grow. And so I would have liked to see her explore a little bit more of that. But I also realized that this book was written, quite a few years ago, and maybe that wasn't a concern, as big of a concern then as it is now. So I also understand that. I also thought it was interesting. One of the things I didn't like is that in the book she lists Nike as a sustainable company, but I think I remember in class that we had talked about Nike being involved in one of the sweatshop scandals. And so I don't know if that had happened maybe previous to this book being written, and since then Nike has, pulled it together a little bit and is more aware of where their things are being produced. I'm not exactly sure how that worked, but I did think that was interesting where we had mentioned that Nike had been involved in some scandals. So those were my likes and dislikes. A lot more likes than dislikes. I don't have a lot to complain about there. And moving on to some of the other questions. Some things that she talked about in this book that we haven't really talked about in class that I enjoyed. I really liked how she talked about makeup and different skincare things that I could, products I could start buying. I like makeup, I like skincare, and so I thought that was fun that she incorporated that in dress practices because it is a part of dress practice. I also liked how she taught me how to dress my body for my body shape to look the best, and how she gave tips for different events, whether I was going to a cocktail party or if I was going to a birthday party. She had a whole gamut of activities and things we do and the best way to present ourselves for those. And so I really enjoyed the more fashion aspects of that. And we don't necessarily dive into that in class. And so I was excited to read about that. And I thought that was a really fun aspect in the book. The next question, was how she talks about, or how this book talked about the impacts that fashion has on marginalized workers. And a lot of the book, she really didn't address that. But at the beginning, she's introducing sustainable fashion. So she's giving a background on why we should be concerned, why we should be aware of what we're wearing. And she does talk a little bit about, she talks about a decent amount about workers in different countries and how they're not receiving the treatment they should. She brought up, I believe it was Bangladesh. It was on page 19. Go to it to remember exactly what she said. And page 19, and even the ones before, like 16 to even 22, she talked about China and how either the shops in China are it's wild. And so she did talk about it quite a bit and how the people are impacted. And so that's where I found that she had talked about those things, but really she didn't talk about them a ton. A lot of the book, like I said, was styling tips, fashion tips, places that I could go to be more sustainable, things I should look for in my clothing. And so that is the answer to that question. Question number 3 was, how has the book related to other sections of the class? How's dress been used throughout time? How is it meeting the needs and demands of society? So I didn't feel like she necessarily talked a ton about the history of dress and different things like that, but I did think it was interesting that some of the things that she talked about, she gave a small history on. So she talked on page 49 about the history of the zip-up hoodie and where that came from. She also talked about t-shirts and how we had talked about in class how those originated from the men in World War II. And so she talked about a few things. None of them were in super depth or really thorough, but she did bring a few things into that discussion. And she talked a lot about how our needs have changed in the 21st century and fast fashion. It's a lot of what she talked about is exactly what we've talked about in class, how fast fashion really has changed the way we do clothes, but maybe not necessarily for the better. And she talked about the impacts that fast fashion has had on the society, on people who are producing the clothing for fast fashion. She talked about how dyes and things that are used to quickly, dye clothing are not eco-friendly. They're not good for the environment. She talked about how agriculture are, having to constantly be producing so much cotton has led to us using more fertilizer. That has caused more pollution, and I have a harder time with that. I'm from a small farming community, And I have seen the impacts that the organic movement has had on, in an agricultural sense. A lot of farmers are suffering because of the organic movement, and when they switch to organic, it's so much less efficient. The fields, if you look at an organic field compared to a regular field, it's ridiculous. It's like completely, it's weeds. There's just weeds everywhere. It's disgusting. It's gross. And if you think about a combine that's harvesting the wheat, it's messy. There's not as high of a yield. And so I can see both sides. I see that, we do need to be careful, but I can also see how the organic movement has hurt my community and hurt the farmers and hurt their income and their families. So that was something that I can see what she's saying, but it's also harder for me because I've seen the impacts that has had on people who are trying to make a living. And the last question, sorry, I'll be done, is the role of the consumer, negative and positive contributions of majority of customers. What I liked is at the very end, she closed the book by saying, it is up to us as an individual, each of us has to decide to change, that we are going to be the change. It's not going to be a change because of big rules that are made for the fashion industry or whatever. It's made on an individual level. We all choose to be sustainable or not be sustainable. And, as a consumer, we can play a role in what happens in the fashion industry. Wherever we put our dollar, that's what's going to be fed. We feed what we want to. And so if we are being more conscious and aware, that's where we will put our money. So I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was good. There was a quote that I had liked. I can't find where I marked it, but I wrote it down. It's actually in my journal. So I've got a lot from the book. I thought it was a great book. And I thought it had a lot to do with things we've talked about in class, but especially with this last chapter we've been talking about. And that is my review.